This is John McMurray of the Society for American Baseball Research, and we're pleased to be joined by Dale Murphy for an oral history this evening. A two-time most valuable player, Dale is remembered for his outstanding play with the Atlanta Braves, both as a power hitter and as an elite outfielder. He won 4 consecutive Silver Slugger Awards, as well as 5 straight Gold Glove Awards. And 2, Dale was the face of the Atlanta Braves and an ambassador for the sport, and his place as a fan favorite has remained long after his playing career ended. And we're so very glad to have Dale with us tonight. We are recording this interview with Dale's permission on April the 16th, 2025. And Dale, what got you interested in baseball?
Well, first of all, John, thank you for that intro. And before I forget, I have to say that I retired in May of 1993. A couple months later, SABR sent me a dot matrix printed with perforated paper and attached perforated edges. Remember those running through the printer? And of all of my home runs, which day I hit the most home runs, how many Hall of Famers I hit home runs off of, and I never told SABR thank you, so I wanted to say thank you.
Great. So Dale, tell us about your early career. You grew up in Portland, Oregon, but tell us about what got you interested in the sport in the first place.
Yeah, I just was a typical kid in the 60s, and I actually had, started playing baseball at 8, which by today's standards, is a little late. But that was the earliest we could start. We didn't have T-ball. Tees weren't invented yet. We didn't have coach pitch. We just started out at 8 years old, pitching to each other. I hit one of my good friends, John Dunn, in the middle of the back, and didn't get off to a very good start. I always tell the story. I got 1 hit my first year, but my dad was the scorekeeper, so it was probably an error. But I remember then I started playing basketball, started watching sports on TV, but remember back then it was only on the weekends. But I do remember watching, Game of the Week. I remember going out, of course, playing catch with my dad. My dad loved to golf too, and he'd hit those little plastic wiffle ball golf balls, and I'd pretend I was an outfielder as he hit a few 9-irons in the backyard, and I'd catch them. And I think, my parents just gave me a chance to play. Really, I never really felt that I didn't do that well that first year. It was fun. And so I just kept going out year after year. My dad was working for Westinghouse at the time. That was Portland, Oregon. And then 5th and 6th grade, during those years, he got transferred to San Francisco. We lived in the Bay Area. And of course, got to go to Giants games at Candlestick and A's games over in the Coliseum, over in the stadium in Oakland. And so that's when I really, I think that's my earliest memories of really starting to really enjoy baseball and want to go to the games, hoping for extra innings every time we went so we could see some free baseball, listening to games on the radio. My dad taught me how to keep score. I was fascinated by that. I remember listening to the radio, trying to keep score actually of an Atlanta Brave San Francisco Giants game. And I lasted a couple innings and then got a little confused, but I still have that somewhere. So, just playing ball. Then I played basketball as I got older. Then I played Pop Warner, 7th and 8th grade, just doing what the neighborhood kids did. I grew up in Southwest Portland, went to Wilson High School. And really, I think that was probably the most influential thing of me really enjoying baseball. But as kids, we played a lot of wiffle ball. Every spare moment that we had, obviously during the summer in Oregon, we'd play wiffle ball. And then what happened is, so 5th and 6th grade, I was in the Bay Area. Then we moved right back to Portland, Oregon, in the area that I grew up with. So had all my good friends there. And then really the Dunn family, Jack Dunn and his kids, John, Jeff, and Jim, um, and their mom, Jean Dunn, were really close friends of ours and remain so, to this day. We love the Dunn family, but Jack, I ended up getting to play ball for him at Wilson High School. Jack is a high school baseball coach, Hall of Fame member, and a member of the College Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame as well. And so I was really close to a baseball family, the Dunn family, and I also got coached by a legendary coach. I moved around positions, but a little bit in high school, ended up getting drafted as a catcher. But Jack taught us how to play every position. So it just taught us the fundamentals of baseball like no one else taught us. Really, at an early age, we learned base running. We learned all aspects of defense, how to pitch to guys, how to hit, philosophies of hitting, and really how to play every position in case we had to move around. So that was really a main part of my growing up. Our family being close friends with the Dunn family, and then me being able to play for Jack Dunn. And then he didn't. I had a really good arm in high school, but he kept me at catcher because a lot of times when you have a good arm, you end up being a pitcher. And we had such a good team that I wasn't that good at pitching anyway, but they didn't need the extra arm pitching. We didn't need it. So I got to be a full-time catcher, and I was drafted as a catcher by the Atlanta Braves my senior year in 1974. And
now, Richard has a question. You mentioned learning multiple positions. He'd like to know what your favorite position was to play.
well, my favorite position, it may sound odd, but it was probably catcher. Uh, I wish I could have been a big league catcher. My defense wasn't good enough. Started throwing the ball all over the place. But there's something special about being a catcher. It's a tough position. You're in on every pitch. Obviously, there's a lot of satisfaction working with pitchers, and I mean, I would love to have been a third baseman or a shortstop, but I always thought those were cool positions. But I enjoyed catching. It was tough. I got hurt catching. I'm sure prolonged my career, obviously get me to the outfield. And then first base was a lot tougher than I expected as well, especially at the big league level. It's just not that easy to move over to first base. And then Bobby gave me a call in '79, the fall of '79 after the season, said, Murphy, you got to be ready to go to the outfield in 1980 in spring training next year of '80 and save my career.
Now, you had the opportunity to go to Arizona State, but you were also drafted by the Braves with with their first pick, which was the 5th overall in the 1974 draft. What was your thinking behind signing with the Braves as opposed to going to Arizona State?
Well, yeah, I made a visit to Arizona State, and of course, Arizona State has always been a baseball school, but especially in the mid to late '70s, they were, the elite team in the country. And I was just figuring if they wanted me to go there, and I went there, made a visit there, that I signed a letter of intent. And interestingly enough, if I'd have gone there, I would have played with Bob Horner and would have won a national championship. Maybe with Bob, I might have been gone the year they won the national championship. But then the Braves called me, and I had no information. My mom and dad and I were trying to figure out what to do, and they said, "Hey, we just drafted you, the 5th pick in the first round, and so we're just trying to figure out what to do." They said our national our head scout's going to fly up to Portland and negotiate your contract, and we hope you sign. So we got to the point, as I recall, it was $52,000, maybe 52.5. But my mom and dad and I just figured that everybody was kind of saying you got to give it 5 years, to see if you make it. And we figured 52,000 was enough to give it a whirl. And if it didn't work out, I'd go back to school with that money I signed with and see what happened. So the money we just felt the money was enough to pass on college. And back then the philosophy was much more so of, if you're going to play pro ball, you got to get into the pro game. And I think that's changed definitely now. But back then it was, you got to get started on your career. I might say the reason why it was that philosophy was pretty accurate back then is I didn't play that much baseball compared to the kids nowadays. I played a lot with one of the best ever American Legion teams in the summer out of Wilson High School, Watco Electric. I mean, we traveled all over the Northwest and played the best competition, went to the World Series in 1973. But it's still no comparison to how many games the kids play now. So it took me 4 years to get to Atlanta full time of professional baseball, winter ball, instructional league, winter ball in the Dominican. And so it was really important to get started in minor league baseball, I felt back then. So we said, let's go for it.
And after you sign with the Braves, you go to the Kingsport Braves in the Appalachian League. And Chad would like to know what your recollections are of playing for Kingsport.
Yeah, I was scared to death, homesick. I got to play for the great Hoyt Wilhelm. Stayed at a hotel, as I recall. A lot of us stayed at a hotel. I doubt if it's there anymore. The Port of Kings in Kingsport, Tennessee. It was the first time I had grits, country ham, and I'm like, I think I could like the South a little bit. But we, we're just a bunch of kids really from all over the country. It was a great experience, and I didn't do that well, but got exposed to professional baseball. And, mostly what I tell people about my first experiences is I was ready to go home after 70 games of rookie ball. I was pretty humbled, and I think I hit in the 220s. I don't even remember. I think I hit 5 home runs, actually. I could be wrong there. But I was ready to go home. As great as Kingsport, Tennessee was, and the people, I was pretty homesick.
Now, did you see yourself as a catcher long term at that point?
Yeah, I didn't have any thoughts about changing positions. My defense was pretty good. And, I was just a skinny kid, really hadn't matured physically. I was overmatched a lot on the pitching. And it is just kind of a rude awakening going from high school to professional baseball, where everybody. Yeah.
Dale, you wound up in Savannah in the Southern League. And at this point, were you starting to think that you were going to make it to the major leagues? You had a pretty successful year in terms of power and RBIs.
Yeah, I thought I had a chance because in '75, back then and still now, if you're a catcher, you got a shot at getting invited to big league camp, whether you're a prospect or not, because they need catchers. So my first spring training was the year after I signed, 1975, big league camp. And then I went there again in '76. And I felt defensively my skills were fine and that I had a shot at making it. It wasn't anything for sure, but I was like, I think I got a shot here if I could start hitting a little bit. And then I got called up in '76 from Savannah. I got called up at the end of the year to AAA in Richmond. And then that was my first call up, was '76 of September. So yeah, I think '76 was a formative year for me. I felt like, I got a shot. I got a shot at this.
What do you recall about your major league debut? You were a September call-up. You played the Dodgers in your first game, and you had some pretty immediate success.
Well, my first hit was a swinging bunt down the third baseline. I remember that off of Rick Roden, and I beat it out. Might have been an error on Ron Say, but I got a hit. I was just again intimidated. Dave Bristol was our manager, and he said, "Hey, it's the same game. Bases are the same distance apart. Everything's the same, except there's, going to be, 40,000 people there." So that wasn't very comforting. But actually, it was kind of a weird day. We actually got rained out, one of the few rainouts ever in the history of Dodger Stadium, and we played a weird doubleheader on a Monday afternoon to try to get that game in because it was September. So the crowd wasn't actually a typical Dodger crowd. Not very many people there, and I got a couple of hits, took some pitches that I could have hit, and again, you just kind of go back to the bench and say, "Hey, I think I could, I could have hit some of those." So, don't give these guys too much credit. Go up there swinging, and so it was. It was fun to start in Dodger Stadium, especially after seeing so many of those Dodger games on TV as a high schooler.
You had developed some throwing problems and wound up back at Richmond in '77. Tell us about what happened there.
Yeah, well, I don't know really when it started, but I just had some issues throwing, which is not unusual actually for in baseball. Guys have it once in a while, and it developed right around that time. So I didn't make the team in '77. Went back to Richmond. Things got better. I got called up again in '77. And I think I have a little over 80 games in the big league as a catcher. So I got out of it by and large, but it just wasn't consistent enough to be a catcher. And so they moved me to first base, which was Bobby moved me to first base in '78. And first base is a tough position. I had quite a few errors, and that's, like I said, that's kind of the process there and how I got to the outfield. But, I ended up, I think I caught Nuxie's 250th win. Every time I see that highlight, I think it's me behind the plate, me or Biff Pocoroba. And so, I started hitting. That's why I started hitting some home runs. So it was like, we got to keep Murph in the lineup somehow. I think that's what Bobby was thinking, and the best avenue of keeping me in the lineup was to get me to the outfield.
Were there any players who were particularly helpful to you early in your major league career?
Well, Nuxie, Phil Necro, he was a great example to all of us youngsters, and I got to catch it. I got to catch Phil, or at least try to catch Phil. I think I had 5 passed balls once in the Astrodome. But a lot of people, well, you wouldn't remember this because it was a one hitter. But I actually, when I got called up in '76 and went to play the Reds, it might have been it was definitely the last weekend of the season. I don't know if it was the last game, so it might have been Saturday, it might have been Sunday of the last weekend of the season. Nuxie had a no hitter going into the ninth. In fact, we got the first out in the ninth. And so you can imagine how nervous I was, and Phil and I was talking. He just said, "Hey, don't worry about calling the right pitches. Just put down knuckleball, and I'll shake you off if I don't want to throw it." So he was trying to keep me, from getting too nervous. But that's what I remember. And Nuxie was always very influential. He's a great example. Always took the ball. Always tried to, not miss a start. And I got a lot of inspiration from that about how to approach the game. Gary Matthews was very instrumental, and a guy who wasn't afraid to tell you the truth, have hard conversations. I tell the story. I was in Chicago taking BP, and he came up to me, really challenged me. Actually, he said, "Hey, you look scared. You're tentative. You better turn that around because, it basically he called me out for looking nervous and scared and tentative. And, it really woke me up. And I'm grateful he had that. It's kind of tough sometimes, but, to tell someone the truth, but I'm thankful he did. It really woke me up. And I always thank him for it whenever I see him.
1978 was a year when you really established yourself. 23 home runs, 79 RBIs. You had Bobby Cox as your manager. Tell us about the difference going from 76 and 77 into 78.
Well, that's when I started the year at first base. I might have caught some games too. Might have been considered a catcher, first baseman, which wasn't unusual back then. Guys playing a little bit of both. But Bobby was hired and really had a bunch of young guys. We really hadn't established ourselves at all. And back then, clubs did that. Put guys in positions in the major leagues and realized that this is going to be a learning year for them. And not so much now. Guys are ready to go, and if you're not ready to go, they're gonna send you back. But a lot of teams were very patient, especially the Braves. And I always am grateful to be able to be with the Braves organization because, like I said, they were patient with a lot of us. We lost, I don't know how many games, probably 100, but they kept running us out there. And, if we'd have been with a different organization that was a pennant contender, it would have been different. So I just knew I was going to be able to play the whole season. And when you can do that, that helps your confidence. Otherwise, you're worried about going up and down back to the minor leagues. So I think that's the thing. In 78, I knew I was going to be there for the year, and it kind of settled me down a little bit and helped my confidence.
What kind of manager was Bobby Cox early in his career?
Well, we all know Bobby, what's the best way to say it? Bobby was feisty and loved his players. You probably know, John, how many times he was thrown out. I don't know. It's a major league record, and I always say it was 162. I don't know if it was exactly 162, but he's got the record. He didn't like to lose. He didn't like the perception that the umpires weren't being fair to his guys. And if they, and that we were a bunch of young guys, we're going to lose a bunch of games, but it didn't matter. Bobby was there to defend you day in and day out. And Bobby would give you chances. And that's the story of my career. He would give you a chance and stick with you. He knew you were going to mess up once in a while. And so that was kind of the start of his career, kind of a tough club to manage at the beginning, but we loved to play for Bobby. We knew that he had our back, and he just loved to compete and loved his guys.
You mentioned a lot of the young players, but also there wasn't a lot of team success at that time. Some really difficult seasons in the 78, for instance. You were 69 and 93. Tell us about the sort of the mentality that you had given the struggles the team was having on the field.
Well, again, we were just young, relatively inexperienced. I don't remember the average age of our roster, but we were just trying to get established. And when you're trying to get established at the major league level, it can be a little slow. And the Braves were convinced that a bunch of us were going to be the future, and that was just going to take time. And it did take a while. Obviously, 80, 81, 82 81 was a strike year, but I think we did okay. As I recall, 80 we did better, maybe closer to 500. And then 82, we kind of broke through. And Joe was there. Joe Torre was managing in 82, but it was really a team. And Joe would say this too, it was a team that Bobby put together. And so I think their patience with us, panned out. We started being competitive, especially in 82.
Tell us about Bob Horner and what he was like as a teammate and what he was like individually.
Well, Bob was the best hitter I ever played with. And when we were in the lineup together, I don't think I complimented him as much as he complimented me. My numbers were statistically always better when Bob was in the lineup. And, I've seen him. I got to help induct Bob into the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. And, we were destined to play together. Like I said, we were either going to play at Arizona State, and then I ended up, getting to play with him with the Atlanta Braves. But Bob, I'll tell you, Bob didn't lack for confidence. And Braves fans know the story when he signed in 1978 with the Braves as the first player picked in that draft. He told the Braves, I'm not going to the minor leagues. And someone told me the other day that going through some of the old newspaper articles, Bob actually went home, didn't join the team. Ted wanted to send him to the minor leagues. Bob said, no, I'm going to go home. And I didn't remember that. But then the Braves relented and signed him. And the rest, as they say, is history. He ended up joining the team in June and won the National League Rookie of the Year. The only player ever to win College Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year in the same year, which is a remarkable thing. He was ready to hit as soon as he got to the big leagues, and one of the very few players that did not play minor league ball. So, went straight to the big leagues. We were all kind of like, who does this guy think he is, And then he just, tore it up. So Bob was a natural hitter. And then unfortunately had some injuries, and I don't want to get too deep into collusion, but Bob was really affected by collusion. Nobody would sign him, and he had to go to Japan. Ended up hitting a bunch of home runs there and coming back and finally finding a job. But I think in many ways I fairly say that me and Bob being together in those years really made my career. I'm grateful that we were teammates and hitters in the same lineup. And, it was just great memories.
Dan would like to know, you were drafted the same year that Hank Aaron left the Braves as a player, but he came back 2 years later, just as you were coming up. How did he help you with your hitting?
Yeah, Bob, Hank, I'd talk to Hank occasionally, but about hitting. He'd say, why don't you try this? And I was like, hey, I'm Dale Murphy. I'm not Hank Aaron. No, but it was very fundamental stuff, really just trying to remind me of things. I think some of my years were probably pretty frustrating to him because he didn't strike out a lot. And obviously he could hit a home run. So, I struck out a lot. I think that was a little frustrating to him. But Hank was very careful not to come down too often. I got to the big leagues. I got to the Braves when Hank was gone. And then I got to the big leagues when Hank took over the minor leagues. So we never had a situation where he was my boss, quote unquote. But Hank was there. Hank was around. But he also didn't. He respected our hitting coaches that we had, and he didn't. His job was the minor leagues. Although I'm sure that some of those early years watching us youngsters was probably kind of frustrating to him. But one of the greatest things ever in my life is being able to know Hank and being able to rub shoulders with him. It's a great experience.
Now, in December of 1979, the Braves acquired Chris Chambliss, and Chambliss, who had played at first base for the Yankees, allowed you to change positions.
Yeah, and that's really when we got real good. There's really not a team that is going to win a championship without a good first baseman. And of course, Bobby knew Chris from the Yankees, and that was really a key signing for us for our success in the early '80s. First baseman. First of all, the plays are difficult. Turning a double play from the first base position, whether you're holding a guy on or you're playing deep, and then it's the one position, especially as a right-hander, that you have to turn all the way around, and then you got to get back to the bag. You got to time it in case the pitcher's covering, et cetera. And then you cover up a lot of errors from the rest of the infielders. And so the defense, having a really good defensive first baseman is the key. And so when we got Chris, and also not only his defense, but his hitting, having me, Bob, and Chris, and then we had Claudel eventually. But when we got Chris, I think it really solidified our defense and really made us a contender.
And you did have this nucleus: Bruce Benedict, Glenn Hubbard, Jeff Burroughs, Gary Matthews. It was all sort of coming together at that time. You had a winning season in 1980 when you were 81-80, but it was still a sign of things to come.
Yeah, that was huge for us. Unfortunately, the next year, was interrupted with a strike, and I think it lasted 50 or 60 games. And but I think '80 was huge for us. Being over 500, being around 500. There's no question that and having Bruce and Hub, and then Rafael Ramirez. I'm not sure when he got there, but just our defense. We could hit the ball, but your defense has got to be there every day, and whether you're hitting the ball or not. And it really started coming together, and then we put it all together in '82. But yeah, our defense, Ramirez and Glenn Hubbard, Rafael Ramirez and Glenn Hubbard led. I think we led the league in double plays. Maybe that means we had a lot of guys on base a lot, but we had some really. With Hub at second, and Chris at first, that was, some really good infield. And then Bob and Jerry Royster played a little third, and Rafael Ramirez. I mean, we were strong defensively, and just started to really blossom.
You made the All-Star team for the first of your 7 times in 1980. What do you remember about that All-Star game in Los Angeles?
Well, being on the team with Pete Rose, Ray Knight and I, was friends with Ray Knight, played winter ball with him a couple of years prior to that. And so we're sitting there, Ray Knight and I are, we didn't start. And, back then, not everybody got the game. So we were like, hey, maybe we'll get the game. We'll see. But as we were going out to the dugout, Pete Rose said, hey, good luck to you guys. Hope you get in the game. And then he said, hey, just remember, when you get out there, treat it like a regular game. He said, we're here to win it, and don't do anything different for this All-Star game than you would do during a regular season game. And of course, I flashed back to him running over Ray Fosse a few years earlier in an All-Star game. But it was serious. I mean, he was serious. And, I think both teams still want to win, but you had National League and American League presidents. They wanted to win desperately, and that's why you didn't plan on getting into the game, because they were going to rotate the pitchers. But managers said, and it was Chuck Tanner, our manager, we're here to win. We're going to try and win, and he actually got me in the game. Last 2 innings, I got an at bat against Goose Gossage, and it was at Dodger Stadium again. It was a tremendous experience. That's all I can say. Ken Griffey Sr. won the MVP, hit a home run. I think he hit it off of Tommy John. And man, it was just, I didn't know what to think. It was my first year in the outfield, and I went to the All-Star game, and it was just, just really boosted my feelings about my career and what I was capable of.
Craig wants to know what's your relationship like with Ted Turner, especially in the early years.
Well, playing for Ted was great. I mean, he was a little unpredictable. He might say something that, not a lot of owners would say. I mean, one time he came in the clubhouse and said, "Hey, Murph, don't worry about this slump you're in because you're saving me a lot of money for our next negotiation," or something like that. I was just shaking my head. I was like, we all know Ted. Braves fans know Ted was unconventional, and the mouth of the South and kind of maverick and all that. But it was great. He took care of us and wanted to win, and you can't ask for anything more from an owner. And I think professional sports missed that a little bit, but the financial side of the game is too big now to have one singular owner, obviously, but to have the face of a franchise, I think, is really important. And that's Ted. Ted was. He had just come off his success as one of the best ever America's Cup captains, and we knew about that. And he wanted to do that in baseball. I mean, he wanted to beat Steinbrenner. There's no question about it. So it was personal to him, and that's motivating to us. And I love playing for Ted. No question about it.
You mentioned the 1982 team and all of its successes. That was the first of 4 straight years for you when you played in all 162 games. Tell us about what made that 82 team so special.
Well, it was our start. I have people telling me that first 2 weeks of 82 is still one of the most exciting things they've seen here, even after
the 13-game win streak, you mean?
Yes. Yeah, we started off 13-0, and I mean, if you look at some of the highlights on, when we won our 13th, people ran onto the field. It was what you did in those days when you won a World Series. It was crazy. And people were at the airport waiting for us to get home from a road trip. I mean, we hadn't done anything in the playoffs or World Series, but it felt like a playoff atmosphere. Everybody was going crazy. And then we didn't play very well after that. That was the challenge. We only played 3 games over 500. And we limped home the last weekend. If it weren't for Nuxie, we wouldn't have made it. Nuxie won a game and hit a 3-run home run in San Diego in his start, I think, on a Friday. And then, we limped into the playoffs because the Dodgers' last game they lost. If they'd have won, we'd have to go for 1-game playoff in LA. And so we only played 3 games over 500. That's why that first 13 games carried us. And it was some real good highs and some really bad. We had a terrible August, but we hung in there, and it was tremendous. We didn't do so well in the playoffs. 82 Cardinals were pretty good. Ended up winning the World Series, but it was great memories. Great memories.
What was the difference playing for Joe Torre as opposed to Bobby Cox?
Well, different personalities, obviously, but I think the common denominator with both of them and their success is a belief in their players, and also the respect the players have for them. Managers need to make decisions, tough decisions, and who to play and where to hit them and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's just the players' respect for them, and they're easy to play for. Not that they didn't demand a lot out of you, but they respected you as well. And that's the common denominator. And so a lot of people forget Joe was there before he went to the Yankees. But, I knew he was going to be successful if he got a team that could be consistent. And so that was great experience for me to see what happened to Joe and Bobby. I mean, those early years were pretty rough, and for Bobby. And when you get some good teams and you get some good managers, I might say I think Cashman and Joe Torre, a great general manager team, and Bobby Cox and John Sherholz, a great general manager team. Those guys need to work together well, and that's what happened for both Joe and Bobby.
What did winning the Most Valuable Player award mean to you?
Well, it kind of sneaks up on you, and you're not, in 1980, I moved to the outfield and made the All-Star team. And then 82, I won the Most Valuable Player award. I mean, it was just stuff I hadn't even thought about a couple of years before that. But it's just a reflection, really, of the success of the team. I mean, you're not going to have RBIs. You're not going to have a chance to do well unless your team's, somewhat competitive. And it was fun to show up to the ballpark. And then I didn't know what to think about 83, but I just used 82 as motivation. And I was like, okay, you won a Most Valuable Player, but use this to work harder and be in good shape, ready to go. I ended up winning it again in 83. So I don't know. It was hard to understand then, and now at my age, I look back and couldn't be more grateful.
People sometimes forget that you also won the Gold Glove Award that year, and you win it at a position that you really had not played up to that point. What was your secret in developing your defensive prowess?
Well, I think every spring I knew I was in the outfield because my defense, in the infield wasn't good enough. But what I learned about the outfield was you could really have an impact on the game if you work hard at it, take it serious, and don't relax out there and think too much about your hitting. I think Andrew Jones is the best example of a guy that could impact the game in the outfield. And so that's the way I tried to approach it. And I worked hard at it and studied our pitchers, so I knew where they were. You got to kind of play the outfield, especially center field, like you play shortstop. Study the hitters, look at the hitters, know the situation, know the score, understand your pitchers, where you got to play, and the hitters, where their tendencies are. And I tried, sometimes you go a couple innings without a ball, and I can't lie, I did think about my hitting occasionally out there, but I tried to approach it, like every ball hit out there is important, because first of all, if it's hit out there, it's probably hit pretty well. There's probably guys on base. If you mess up, it's going to be a run. In the infield, if you make an error, it's not necessarily going to be a run. But if you mess up in the outfield, it's going to be extra bases and a run. So you better take it seriously.
Going back to the National League Championship Series in 1982, that was a best of 5, not a best of 7. And that made a big difference.
Yeah, especially, yeah. Well, our story there, and I still have fans come up to me. They go, we were winning 1-0 with Nuxie in the 5th, and we got rained out. I said, I know. I mean,
and that was game 1 when that was 2 outs from being an official game, and then it gets rained out, and they had to start all over again as opposed to resuming the game where it was.
Yeah, and a 1-run lead on the Cardinals in St. Louis is not very much, obviously, but when Nuxie's pitching, who won 17 games, and George Hendrick, as I recall, didn't like facing Phil Niekro. Dane Orge, one of my good friends, was playing first, and he was a great hitter. But George, he wasn't in the lineup. Nuxie was rolling, and it would have been nice. I don't know, today's day and age, we probably wouldn't have started. We probably would have, just said, let's start tomorrow because this game's going to get interrupted. And, but there's nothing we could do about it. It was our best game, our best 5 innings, because after that we got swept. And that was a great team, though. That was a great team, World Series champion.
And as you think back on the 82 Braves, what do you remember the most about them?
Well, the first 13 games, really, it was the closest I'd ever experienced anything that must be like to win a World Series. We actually had trouble getting off the field, running through the crowd. And, the first 13 games and the last weekend. I think that was just, we didn't know how good we were, and then we went 2 weeks at the beginning without losing, and we're just like, what is going on? We just felt like we weren't going to lose, and it was a tremendous feeling.
You had the MVP in 82 and in 83. Which season do you think was the better of the two?
Well, I always remember 82 just because our team, went to the playoffs, but 83 was my best year, as I recall, overall. Ended up stealing 30 bases and, hitting 30 home runs. So that was pretty unique at the time. And I think everything came together in 83.
And in terms of your own, what was it like just playing in Atlanta? Tell us about the fan base and just sort of the overall atmosphere.
Well, first of all, playing in Atlanta Fulton County Stadium was great for my career as well because it was a hitter's ballpark. I think we all know that it had the nickname the launching pad, and it was a great place to hit. And playing in Atlanta, the Southeast, playing, we knew in high school when we weren't doing well, we knew when high school football started because Friday nights, there weren't a lot of people there. But when you're playing well, it's, you can't expect fans to, I think, when I think about Wrigley Field, for instance, they went through a lot of years where people were just showing up to the ballpark because it was Wrigley Field. Team wasn't that good, but they were going there for the experience of being at Wrigley. And early on in my career, I think, we had to earn the fans, to get them there and to play well. And I think getting us on TBS was huge throughout the Southeast and throughout the country. But all of our games, once we started playing well, people saw it on TBS. And, I run into many people, not only around the country, but especially in the Southeast. They said we just, couldn't get enough of the Braves games. We loved going into Atlanta. And so, I think the team has been so competitive the last 20, 25 years that, you forget that during those early years, it was a challenge and we had to earn their attendance at the ball games. But once we did that, everything was great.
Robert wants to know what your relationship was like with the TBS announcers, particularly Skip Carey.
Oh, we had a great relationship. I think that, Skip and Ernie and Pete, those early days, that's what made some of our broadcasts. I mean, we weren't that competitive except for a few years. And so baseball gets a little difficult to broadcast when the team isn't that good. But I believe they should be in the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame broadcasters, all of them. And Don Sutton, too, came along. I mean, that's what made what you got when you watch TBS was a hometown broadcast, because before that it was game of the week, and Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek and others who did it didn't know us, but these were our announcers. And so if you were wherever you were with cable TV and you're watching the Braves, and people share this with me around the world and around the country, is that they're diehard Braves fans, and we were on every night, and our broadcasters brought you a hometown broadcast. And so that endeared the fans on TBS. And they were TBS kids, as the phrase has been coined now, because it was their team. They know our whole lineup. They come up to me and ask me all the time what all the guys are doing. And we were on every night. Cubs were on in the day, but our broadcasters traveled with us. We saw them every day, and through the ups and downs. So it was a great relationship.
Now, in 1984, the Braves finished in second place to San Diego. Jimmy and Kellen particularly want to know about the infamous brawl that you had with the Padres that year, and what you remember about it.
Wow. Well, yeah, you can. I always tell people if they want to have some fun, unfortunately, it's a fight. But Google 1984 Braves Padres brawl, and there's still quite a few highlights on YouTube. Wow. Just chaos. Right from the first pitch, Pascual Perez hits Alan Wiggins in the middle of the back, and Pascual had good control. We're just like, what? Usually there's a little history, and there was no history here. That's the way Pascual wanted to start the game. The rest was not very pretty. It was not a good day at the ballpark for baseball, but I'm sure some fans will look back and say, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. So the Padres decided to hit, sometimes you retaliate, you hit the next guy up in the lineup. But what they decided was that they were going to hit Pascual as long as he was in the game. And every time Pascual came up, which I think was 3 times, they threw at him, and we had a bench clearing brawl every time. And then we thought it was over. And Donnie Moore, I think in the top of the 9th, in fact, Bruce Benedict shares the story. Joe Torre told Bruce before he went out, it told Bruce to tell Donnie coming in from the bullpen that, everything's over. And so Bruce Benedict tells the story. He went out and said, "Hey, Donnie, this thing's over. Don't hit anybody else. It's all over." And Donnie looked at him and said, "Well, not for me, it isn't." And so Greg Nettles was the first guy hit up, and Donnie Moore hits him. And then another, I don't know how many guys got thrown out, and fans got arrested. Fans got pulled out. I mean, it was total chaos. And then we had another bench clearing brawl at the end of the game. And then finally it ended somehow. And it was the most exhausting game, because what happens if usually the guys that aren't in the fight are trying to break it up. And those are usually the guys that get hurt. And you're just exhausted you're like you're wrestling in between innings, trying to pull guys off and separate guys, and just chaos all the whole day.
Tell us about your power. You had 4 consecutive years where you hit 36 home runs or more. You win the MVP in 82 and 83, but you lead the league in home runs in 84 and 85. Were you trying to hit home runs?
Well, that was a good thing about playing at Fulton County Stadium. You just had to hit it well, and it had a chance. Our fence was about an 8-foot fence most of my career. Sometimes it was a little higher, but the ball carried every to every field. So no, I don't know what I would have done at Fenway with that close left field wall, because with the monster out there, because I think what I tried to do, and that's why I hit a lot of balls to right field in home runs early in my career. When I was hitting best, I was hitting the ball well to right field, but it would go that way. It was symmetrical, and so it was just a great place to hit. And so I didn't think about it a lot, except try to take a good swing, because I knew if I took a good swing, the ball would carry. And I think a lot of people say it is because it was round, that if there was any wind from passing thunderstorm, it would come in and circle one way or the other. So if you could hit the ball the other way, if the wind was coming in from left, going out to right, and if there wasn't any wind, then it just always carried. So no, I didn't. I tried not to think about it while I was hitting.
Dennis would like to know about the July 4th, 1985 game, the 19-inning game, the Rick Camp game, and wondered if that was the strangest one in which you appeared. In that game, Rick Camp came up. He was a career .060 hitter with no home runs, and he batted because the Braves didn't have any position players left. And you can tell us what happened.
Well, yeah, that was the weirdest game. I mean, the brawl was crazy, but that game, Doc Gooden started the game, and we went into our first rain delay, and it was July 4th. They didn't want to rain out because of the gate. They wanted to keep that gate and get the game in. And, it just, obviously we had more rain delays, and then we tied the game up and more rain delays. And then I think Terry Harper might have hit a home run early. I can't remember if he hit one, when he hit one, but tied it up. And then Rick Camp came up. And again, the best thing to do is just to go on YouTube and Google Rick Camp game, July 4th, 85. A great clip of Gary Carter going out in front of home plate and moving the outfield in, telling everybody to come in, because we all knew Rick couldn't hit. I mean, even BP, and pitchers took BP back then, even relief pitchers. Rick started and he relieved, but he just did not have a good swing, but he got a pitch. And I think John Sterling was doing the games then for the Braves, and I think he said something like, if Rick Camp hits a home run here, this will definitely be, certified the craziest game in the history of baseball. So I think I got home about 5 a.m. I think the game ended about 4. The fireworks still went off. People did not know what was going on in the city. And Keith Hernandez hit for the cycle, but they didn't give it to him because it was extra innings, I think. And Rick hitting that home run was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Russell wanted to ask about the April 30, 1986 game. You'd cut your hand on the outfield wall. You got 9 stitches, and at that time you had a consecutive game streak that was in jeopardy. And then the next night you got a pinch hit home run. He would like to know sort of what the discussion was in the dugout that night about you playing, given your hand.
Yeah, well, the night before that game, I went back. We had a tall fence, but remember the scoreboard. Braves fans will remember the scoreboard was kind of below the fence on the cement wall behind the fence. So they needed plexiglass so you could see that part of the scoreboard. And there was big plexiglass sheets were put together. I went back for a ball. We're playing the Mets, and got my hand as I was bracing my contact with the fence. Got my hand right here stuck in there, and caught the ball, and then pulled my hand out, and it was bleeding, and I didn't know how bad it was. And I can't remember. I guess I got taken out of the game and got some stitches in my hand. It was only about 4 or 5, but yeah, that was the big talk. Is he going to play the next day? And I went out the next day and put a batting glove on my right hand and took a little BP, and it was in a place that didn't really move that much, just kind of right there. But Chuck was our manager, Chuck Tanner, and he said, well, all we did was talk about, we'll try and get you in. And, I had that streak going, and that's all I remember. He said, well, we'll pinch hit you. So the weirdest thing is I ended up hitting my only home run off of Doc Gooden, and as a pinch hitter, and it was real memorable in the fact that I had these stitches. People, I think, thought my hand was falling off, but I had the stitches and I had that consecutive game streak going. So it was kind of a dramatic thing. I wish it would have won the game, but it didn't. I think it got us a little closer, but every time I see Doc, he reminds me of that game.
Now, ultimately, you had 740 consecutive games, and Billy Williams had the National League record at that time, 1,117. And I guess I wondered first, did getting the record mean anything to you? And I know you had ultimately sat out a game in July 1986 in Philadelphia. And what was your thinking in terms of ending that consecutive game streak?
This consecutive game streak just happened. I was playing my best baseball and I wasn't hurt. I mean, I had a few things like that, stitches in my hand that one game. a couple of bumps and bruises along the way, but I was playing so good and that there was really no reason to take me out. But I do believe that days off and skipping games when you're playing 162, it's not a bad thing either, but it just kind of happened. I think you got to be very careful on streaks like that because they tend to mushroom into something that's bigger than the team. And you got to be very careful with that. You got to do what's best for the team always. So Ted Simmons did like how this came out because the people were blaming him for this, but I was talking to him after a game in Philadelphia, and Ted, been around the game and great player. He just came up to me, he goes, "How you doing? I mean, what do you think?" And I go, "Man, I am struggling." And he goes, "Well, do you think you need a day off?" Or I can't remember the exact conversation, but it's like, if you think you need a day off, you better go tell Chuck, because Chuck's not going to take you out of the lineup because he doesn't want to be the guy that brought it all up and ended the streak. And I went right in to Chuck's office right after Ted and I talked. I said, "Chuck, I need a day off tomorrow." And he just said, "You sure?" And I go, "Yeah, my mind is so, it's the first slump I had in 4 or 5 years. Any significant slump anyway." And so I took the day off, and there's just some good value in that. I've learned, baseball is weird because sometimes you need, it's not like you're not like you're physically tired, but your brain gets fried. And sometimes it's good to sit on the bench and actually miss a game and take that pressure off you. And then it relieves some of the pressure, especially if you're struggling, which everybody does. So, and then you can be even better for the next week, 10 days. So if a guy needs a day off, that's fine. We have 162 games, but it just was created. It was something that I wasn't, going to try and maintain in a way that really wasn't authentic, I guess. By the way, I think Matt Olson's creeping up on breaking my record this summer. So, that'd be cool for him.
Now in '87, Bob Horner had left for St. Louis. You didn't have a lot of protection in that lineup, yet you go on to hit 44 home runs. What was the story there?
Well, people like this story. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the ball was juiced that year. If you look at everybody had career highs that year. I say everybody, but Andre Dawson hit 49. I think he won the MVP that year. I had 44. Guys that hit 15 had 25. I mean, I hit balls that year. I was like, well, maybe that's got a shot. And then I'd get to first base. I'd be like, man, that ball went out. So personally, I think the ball was juiced that year. And I don't know the reason why, but I know MLB will deny it, but I think there's been times when the ball's been different. And I hit well that year. I was, I don't remember my average. Do you have my average in front of you?
You 80.
What was it, 87?
87. Yeah, I got you at 295.
I had one of my best years average wise as well. So I was putting the ball in play and balls were going out, and I just think you look at the numbers from 86 to 87, then to 88. I didn't hit that well, but it just had a big balloon, or what do you call it? Big jump in home runs in 87.
87 was kind of a year of transition. You had some older players, Ken Griffey and Greg Nettles, but you're also getting the nucleus of that early 90s team. Guys like, Tom Glavine and Ron Gant and Pete Smith and so forth. So tell us about what was going on at that time.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for the chance to play with Ken Griffey Sr. and Greg Nettles. Just some great professional guys, and then what they were called to do, pinch hit and do some things. I think Greg Nettles had one of the best pinch hitting years I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I can't remember the statistics, but he was unbelievable. And just playing with those guys, been around. I mean, I'll tell you, just came to mind. Greg Nettles was great at stealing pitches from the pitchers. You know, their tell, whether their glove was, you know, the way they held their glove or something like that. And he was just great at it. He taught me a lot about watching pitchers and trying to see how they were tipping, you know, what pitch they were going to throw. And so was Ted Simmons was there. You know, we tried a lot of things to try to get things going, but we kind of had a mix of veteran guys and young guys. And you're right, there was some good young talent, but we just couldn't put it together at that particular time. But we saw some good things in the future. I was just going to say Greg Nettles got me a home run. I could not get comfortable off of Jamie Moyer. He had a great changeup. You know, he's left-handed, didn't throw hard, but he had great control, great changeup, nice little slider. And I could not get on the same page with him. And Greg came up to me. He goes, "Hey, Murph, we're in Chicago." And he goes, "Murph, I got his pitches. I can see him from the dugout. You know, I can tell you when a fastball's coming." And so I said, "Okay, you know, let me know." And so he goes, "Okay, if I'll just say, 'Let's go, Murph,' you know, you'll hear me yell Murph from the dugout if he's throwing a fastball." And so I got up. I think it was a 3-run home run. So I got up, and it's weird feeling when you're trying to relay the pitches from the dugout because I'm trying to listen. I'm up there, and he's getting ready to go into his windup. He goes into his stretch, and you know, at the last second, I hear this, "Let's go, Murph," and or "Come on, Murph." And so I looked fastball and ended up hitting a home run. That was a lot of fun.
The next few years, 88, 89, and 90, you hit 20 home runs each year, but it wasn't quite the same. And I know you had some struggles and frustrations during those years. So what was different in those years, and were you battling injury at the time?
Not really, but not at that point. I mean, I had a few injuries through my career, but at that point, I was just, I don't know, I just kind of lost at the plate, couldn't get that feeling back. We were not doing well as a team. I think I was starting to feel a little bit of wondering, you know, how long I was going to be there, how long I was going to keep playing. Saw some of the young players coming up, and I knew my contract was up. So then I heard a few trade rumors a couple of years earlier, and I think Nancy and I just, you know, we had just a lot of talk about, you know, what should we do? And I just felt that, and Nancy felt too, we both felt it was time to move on, that we would kind of force the issue. And it took a year or so to get that going. But in 90, finally, I went to Bobby Cox and I said, I got to move on, Bobby. I think it's time. And in 91, I'm going to be a free agent. If you get a trade that looks good to me and Nancy, you know, we'll go, but otherwise I'm leaving next year. So that's why they worked hard on getting a trade. And the Phillies extended my contract. And so I didn't have to go out on the free agent market in 91. I had an extension. And so I was like, wow, well, this is completely different than Atlanta. So we'll do it. And that's how I got to Philly.
And, you know, sometimes people say, how could the Braves trade Dale Murphy? But you initiated it.
Yeah, I've seen some articles over the years that I did talk about that, but you know, a lot of people just either didn't want to believe it, or you know, they still come up to me and go, "I'm still mad at the Braves for trading you," and you know, maybe I needed to explain it more, but it was a mutual decision. And I told Bobby, I said, you know, Nancy and I were ready to move on. We just saw what happened to Phil Niekro a couple of years earlier. Phil got released by the Braves. I mean, you know, things happen except for a handful of guys at the end of their career. Chipper, Jeter, you know, most guys go through, they have to leave. it gets kind of rocky. And so I felt it was my time. I thought I'd have a little control over it if I initiated it. And so that's what I did. And you got to remember, the Phillies extended my contract a couple of years. So I was like, well, this is going to work out good. And the Phillies were actually up and coming. 93, they went to the World Series. And I got traded there in 90. And unfortunately, I had some injuries. 92, I missed most of the year with staph infection, which was probably MRSA. And it was a terrible year. Missed most of the year, spent most of the year in Atlanta trying to recover from this infection. And tried to make a comeback in 93, and I wasn't quite healthy.
Bruce would like to know, what was it like to play with John Kruk on those Phillies teams, and how similar is he as a Phillies announcer to what he was like as a player?
Oh, he's no different as a Phillies announcer. Kruk usually says whatever's going through that mind of his, and I think, he was a great hitter and defensively as well. And I still talk to John every once in a while. He'll text me and check in, and I love playing with the Phillies. I think we all know the early '90s Phillies had a reputation, the fighting Phils and all that kind of stuff. And but I felt nothing but mutual respect. They were my teammates, and I enjoyed playing with them. We had different ways of going about things. And, after the game, sometimes they'd go one place and I'd go another, I think is the best way to put it. But Crucky was great. I love playing with Crucky and kept things loose and played hard. That team played hard. And I enjoyed playing with those guys and playing for the Philly organization. It was a great experience.
Yes, he would like to know about watching the Braves go from worst to first in '91 after you'd left the team and you're with the Phillies. That had to be extremely difficult to see the team that you'd left go to the World Series.
Yeah, it was. I make no bones about it. It was. I talked to Nance and being in Atlanta, and I'd be. We lived in Philly for a while, but eventually. And we had a great experience there with the schools and everything in Philadelphia. But then Nance moved back to in '91, started the kids in school in Atlanta, in Roswell, where we were. And she said, this city has gone berserk. I mean, she goes, Dale, there are tomahawks taped to windshield wipers, doing the tomahawk chop. I mean, she's like, it's crazy here. And it was hard not being a part of it. No question about it. I mean, we were jealous and whatever you want to say. It was a weird feeling. And so soon after leaving in '90, and then the very next year, they just tore it up, went to the World Series. So I mean, I was happy for those guys and the organization, but it was hard not being a part of it. No question.
Philadelphia had an interesting collection of players. Wondered if you could talk about Darren Dalton and also Lenny Dykstra.
Well, like I said, the whole team kind of had a personality that was people probably tried to figure out how is Murph fitting in with this personality of the team. But I think we just all had a mutual respect for each other and went out and played the game hard. And like I said, they knew I was a veteran and how I approached the game and life. But like I said, I felt that respect and these guys were teammates of mine and I enjoyed the time there.
If you could talk about the famous incident where Tom Glavine was asked to throw at you following a previous incident. I believe that started with Wally Ritchie hitting Otis Nixon sometime prior.
Yeah, oddly enough, it was my first game back to Atlanta as a member of the Phillies. And I just talked to Tim Hudson about a month ago, and he said, hey, he brought that game up, and he goes, that was your first game back to Atlanta? He goes, I was in high school, and that was my first Braves game ever. That was Tim Hudson. But yeah, we had a fight. Jim Fregosi did not like Otis Nixon stealing. They had a 6-7 run lead. It was about the 7th or 8th inning, and I think Otis stole second, then he stole third, and Jim Fregosi got pretty upset and said, "Okay, we're hitting Otis next time up." And so then Wally Ritchie came in, and they told Wally what you got to hit Otis Nixon. So he hits Otis. Otis charges the mound and really spikes Wally across his stomach and tears his uniform. And then we went. When they came up to play us, it was. Like I said, that was my first time back, so it was probably August or September. But it was the last time we played them, and everybody was like, is there going to be any holdover to the fight in Atlanta? And nothing happened, the first 8 innings. But what happened was the bullpen told Wally Ritchie that if our starters don't hit Otis, we'll hit him for you. So nobody hits Otis until Roger McDowell comes in, who ended up being the pitching coach for the Braves for quite a few years with Bobby. So Roger McDowell comes in and hits Otis. And I don't think the bench is cleared, but things were not going very well over in the Braves dugout, especially with Bobby. And Bobby's, Braves were in the dugout. And as soon as he got hit, he says, we're hitting the first guy up. And Tom Glavine goes down to the lineup card and sees, he goes, duh, duh, duh. He goes, oh, it's Murph. And so he comes over to Bobby and says, Bobby, it's Murph. And Bobby probably said a few other things, but the one thing he said is, I don't care who it is. So it was really, that's the story. And then the rest of the story is, you can tell Glav was really conflicted. It would have been easier if he just drilled me, but he was not putting his heart into it, didn't want to hit me, and was throwing it slow enough to where I could get out of the way. And
you were stepping out of the batter's box before the pitch was even delivered.
Yeah, he threw it me 3 times. And by the 3rd time, I was moving out of the way because I was like, in my mind, I'm looking at him winding up. I go, he's going to do it again. And then he got thrown out. Bobby got thrown out. And that's the story, is how it happened. And Bobby loves his guys. If he doesn't care who's on the other team.
Now, you were battling some knee troubles in Philadelphia. You ultimately were released and signed with the Rockies in 1993. What was your thinking in going to Colorado?
Well, just to see if I could play. My knee did not recover 100% from 92 with this staph infection, which we know now the acronym MRSA really describes exactly what I had. So it was my front knee, the knee that you plant when you hit. And so it was always kind of achy and not feeling good. And I was pinch hitting in Colorado, but they gave me a shot. And so it was their inaugural year, and they're like, hey, we'll give Murph a shot, a veteran guy, and kind of make a little headline there. They signed me, and I went there and just didn't play very well and wasn't healthy. And so Don Baylor called me in. In fact, I had a great experience being able to play with the guys there. Don Baylor was the manager. Don Zimmer was his bench coach. So I got to play with Zim for a couple months. But Don Baylor called me over to his room. I can't remember where we were at. I can't remember. Anyway, he said, Murph, hey, we'd love to have you here, but it's time to move on. We're going to release you. And so I said, hey, before you release me, I might retire. And he said, okay, well, let us know. So I called my agent. My agent said, my agent was Bruce Church. And I said, Bruce, hey, they're going to release me, but I think I might retire. And he said, don't wait me. He said, don't retire. He said, don't retire, because if they release you, they owe you the rest of the year's salary. But if you retire, it's voluntarily retiring. Your contract's null and void. And I said, oh, great. What should we do? He said, well, let me call. And he called Bob Gebhardt, who was the GM. And he said, he talked to him. And Bob said, hey, let me talk to the people here. And they called us back and said, hey, we're going to let Murph retire. We're going to honor that contract. We're going to pay him the rest of the year. And they did not have to do that at all. It was a great gesture for me and Nancy. And it didn't end the way we thought it would end, but I'm grateful to be a part of that Rockies team that inaugural year.
You were at 398 home runs. Did you think about getting to 400?
Well, I always say if you can't hit one out of Mile High Stadium as a right-handed hitter, then you can't hit one out of any stadium. And I didn't hit one there in 2 months. And I learned how hard pinch hitting was. That was for sure. People said, why didn't you go on and be a DH? Because, you could have hit two more. And I was like, no, I was serious. I couldn't hit one out in Mile High Stadium. It was only like 270, and a mile high. I was done.
You finished your career with 398 home runs, 1,266 RBIs, 2,111 hits, and ultimately the Braves retired your number. What did that mean to you?
Well, being able to have a number retired with a franchise like the Atlanta Braves, and you're looking up there and you see Hank's number up there, and I can't remember who all's number was retired at that time, but Eddie
I think it
Massey.
was Spahn, Matthews, and Negro.
Yeah, I'm just like, it was an incredible feeling and honor. And, I owe the Braves a lot to give me a shot to play, and then to have my number hanging up there. Just doesn't happen very often. And the guys I'm up there with now, definitely one of the biggest honors of my career.
Many people champion your cause for the Hall of Fame. I'm sure you get that question often about being in the Hall of Fame. How do you view the process at this point?
My understanding is that I'm eligible again. Well, I got to get on the ballot for my era, but I understand that I think I'm in the modern era. They've changed it a few times, but I believe my era is up in December, and then I was on the ballot last time, and I think I'm going to be on the ballot again in December. And I'm grateful the Hall of Fame has changed it a little bit, so I'm in an era and on a ballot that is my contemporaries, and they realize that a lot of guys that were just getting lumped into the Veterans Committee, the thousands of guys it would help us. And Lee Smith's gone in, Alan Trammell, I can't remember all. Ted Simmons has gone in. Other guys on these era, the voting concentrated on these certain eras that you played in. So, I'm optimistic that it's going to happen, but it hasn't happened for this long. It's not easy to get in. I don't know what to expect. It's hard to get in, even in this way, because there's 16 voters and I need 12 of them. And there's other guys that are going to be on the ballot that are going to be worthy to go in. I appreciate the fact that I'm being considered, and I think we'll have to see what happens in December. And I'm on a ballot. I was also on the regular ballot for 15 years, I think, and that doesn't happen very often. So I'm just very grateful be a part of it, be a part of the conversation.
Now, you've been generous, very generous with your time, Dale. I'll have a few last questions for you, and then we'll let you go.
You bet.
Dixie wants to know versus Vida Blue, you were 203, 5 home runs, 18 strikeouts, while versus Fernando Valenzuela, he hit 318 with 8 home runs. And what was the difference facing these two pitchers?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know I had that many strikeouts against Vida. And I don't, what's interesting about that is I faced Vida Blue at the end of his career. I had Chris Chambliss faced Vida in the American League when Vida was a little bit more in his prime. And he said there was no one like Vida. He said Vida Blue was unbelievable in his prime. And I think just reflecting back on that, Vida had a good high fastball. And even at that age, and if you couldn't catch up to it, which I couldn't, but he might bring it down a little bit. And I hit a couple home runs, but 18 strikeouts kind of speaks for itself. Fernando was just a completely different pitcher. He was a screwball pitcher. His fastball just wasn't like Vida's. And so, I was just able to see the ball better off of Vida and try to wait for a mistake. And I love to go the other way during my prime and facing Fernando. And that's the way he worked. He worked a lot of way off the plate. And I was just able to see it and wait for I hit a few hanging screwballs that were over the plate. And if you were patient enough with Fernando, he'd give you something to hit. He wasn't a strikeout pitcher. Fernando and Vida still was at that end of his career.
Michelle would like to know who the toughest competitor you played against was.
Well, it's hard not to say Pete Rose. I think his competitive speaks for itself. Nolan Ryan, Mike Schmidt, Will Clark was one of the best hitters I've ever seen. I'm trying to go around the league. I think some of those great Dodger teams, Steve Garvey, Ozzie Smith, Gary Carter, Andre Dawson. But I think the first guys, as far as competitive, that were noticeably different would be Nolan and Pete.
Wants to know one of his recent great baseball memories was watching the Baseball Project in an old Portland bar play To the Veterans Committee with you and your son in attendance. How do you feel about the song?
That was so fun. Yeah, somehow Mike Mills, I think we were texting. Somehow we saw they were in Portland, and my son is a professor at Oregon State, Chad. And so we're like, and I think it might have been the first time they played it publicly, and so Chad and I went to the show, and it was crazy. I gave Mike Mills one of my jerseys before, and he wore it up there on the stage, and people were looking around, and every once in a while I got recognized. They're like, what are you doing? They were trying to, like, that song is about you, and that's Mike Mills, and Peter Buck was there, and the rest of the Baseball Project. It was a very interesting harmonic convergence. How about that phrase? But the Baseball Project, Mike's all of them are huge baseball fans. Mike's a legendary Braves fan. And, he said, we did this song, and he came out after. He goes, "What'd you think, man?" And I go, "Hey, it was awesome." He goes, "It's a great punk rock song. It's got some punk rock vibe to it, the way it, the beat and everything." And Mike's, it's just been funny post career to get to know Mike and all of that. It's been a real interesting thing. Social media. That's how it all started, really. connecting over social media. And then I actually, the first time I met him, I was invited to talk. Okay, somebody at the Metropolitan Museum of Art contacted me and said we just were gifted 50,000 baseball cards from somebody, you know, in the Midwest, and we're going to talk about our baseball collection, and we'd like you to fly you out to New York, be a part of the discussion about what it's like to have a baseball card and your experience. So my son Chad was living in State College, PA, getting his PhD, and I said, hey, you know, I'll pick you up. We'll drive to New York. And he said, well, what is it? I said, well, go online. It's something about the Met, and they're going to have a group there called the Baseball Project. And so my son Chad got online, and he goes, Dad, do you know who's in the Baseball Project? And I was like, hey, you know what? And then he said, well, he said, you know, these guys are all famous musicians, and Mike and Peter Buck and from REM, Dad. I was like, oh, I didn't connect all of that. So we went there and we listened to him play a few songs and met them all. And, you know, Mike was, of course, with REM in Athens during the 80s and late 70s, I think, whenever they started, and just huge Braves fans. And so it was a fun connection. I got to say this, though, afterwards, Mike comes up to me and Chad. He goes, hey, what are you guys doing tonight? I go, well, we're not doing anything. He goes, hey, Michael just called. And Chad goes, Dad, that's Michael Stipe just called. And we're all going out to dinner. You want to go? And so met, you know, Michael Stipe and the rest of REM, and just went to dinner with them. And Chad and I walked out, and it was a, you know, surreal gets used a lot, but it was quite a night.
Both Jason and Mike want to know what your favorite baseball card of yourself is.
Well, kind of unique, probably. I got, theoretically, I got 2 rookie cards, I guess. I was supposed to make the team both years and didn't. That reverse negative is kind of fun. I like these little ones. I guess they're called tobacco cards. The old, is it Allen and Ginter? I kind of like all of, maybe they've done some bigger ones, but those little ones kind of, I always think are kind of cool. I don't know. That's what first comes to mind.
Susan would like to know what you think of the torpedo bats used this year.
Well, you know, you hit a few home runs and it kind of got everybody's attention. Now I think I haven't heard about it the last couple weeks, so I don't know if it was the bat or the Milwaukee pitching that got the Yankees off to such a good start, but I certainly will keep my eyes on it. I think it'll be interesting, maybe for young kids, if they start making aluminum bats with that and move the sweet spot. I think that's what they're trying to do. I think an aluminum bat with that torpedo shape of a sweet spot moved down toward the handle could be really interesting for young hitters.
What are your thoughts on? I'm sorry.
I'm not so sure it's making that big a difference yet. We got to study the physics of it a little bit more.
What do you think about the modern game of baseball and how analytics have changed it?
I think it's done some good and some bad. I like the rules changes to speed the game up, so I'm good with the pitch clock. You know, I think people have misinterpreted launch angle and how a launch angle is created. To me, at launch angle, the best thing I think you can do is Google Mike Schmidt's 500th home run and look at his bat angle when he swings and how the ball goes up. You know, Mike kind of goes down and the ball goes up because of where you hit the ball with the bat, not swinging up and trying to hit the ball up, because I think hitting the ball up has created a lot of strikeouts. And so what you have is guys throwing harder, a lot more high fastballs, and guys swinging up, and you're going to have a lot of swings and misses. So that's the only thing as far as analytics and being able to analyze angle of the angle and the bat speed. I think it's created a lot of guys that are trying to swing up and create a good launch angle and hit a home run, which has resulted in a lot of strikeouts. And I think that's the one part of the game. I struck out a lot, but I don't like it when everybody strikes out a lot.
Dale, you've been very generous with your time. Just two final questions. What is your favorite memory of your own career?
Oh, wow. Probably, getting to the playoffs, the two MVPs, and I think the Roberto Clemente Award is as real special place, and in remembering my career. And then, I wouldn't have had a career without, my wife Nancy. We have 8 kids, and they were all born between 1980 and 93, and so that was my career. And I think what I'm most thankful for is to have a family like we have, kids like we have, and Nancy and I to survive this crazy career that we had. And it wouldn't have happened without Nancy, because I was not always able to forget the game, leave the game at the clubhouse and just come home and be a nice, cheerful guy. When things weren't going that well, I'd get home late. I wasn't up when all the kids were up. Sometimes in the middle of the night, she was up. I was on the road, and I think being able to get through that and have our family we have, I owe it all to Nancy.
When people think about your career years from now, how would you like to be remembered?
Just someone I probably didn't look that emotionally tied to the game, because I wasn't very outward, didn't, show a lot of emotion out there. But I just want them to know that I was into it, and that fire was burning in there probably more than people could see. But someone who appreciated every chance I had, and who, played hard, put the team first, and very thankful for the chance to be with the Braves organization that gave me a chance to play.
Well, Dale Murphy, we are grateful for your time, for staying with us for so long and answering everyone's questions. On behalf of everyone who's with us, I extend our gratitude, and we wish everyone good night.
Thank you, John. Great to be on with you.